Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of In the Prog Seat. It's Tuesday night. We're talking prog. We got a big crew tonight. Before we get into the topic at hand, it's another album war. Instead of 40 years, though, this time we're going to go back 50 years to 1972. Let's introduce the panel. We've got my fellow New Yorker, Chuck Alvarez. We've got all the way from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, longtime writer on Sea of Tranquility. First time here on the channel in a while, John Newdorf. Yeah. Welcome back, John. What's going on?
Thank you. Thank you.
We've got from Scotland, Stephen Reed. Also from Canada, Rick Labonte, who's got a new CD out. Please go check it out. We've got from Chicago, George Lennie. From Pennsylvania, Anthony Ferraro. Also from Chicago, Louis Nasser. Another New Yorker from upstate New York, Eric Porter. And the professor of prog from New Jersey, the owner of the Laser's Edge, Ken Golden. Greetings, gentlemen. We have entered into
greetings,
everybody. Album war once again. So we're going back to 1972 for this particular episode. Two pretty damn good albums by two pretty notable bands. The first of which released in 1972, obviously, Emerson, Lake and Palmer Trilogy. And its opponent also released in 1972. Their second album they released that year. Gentle Giant Octopus, Roger Dean cover. It's Octopus versus Trilogy. We're going to start with, we're going to go Chuck, John, Stephen, Rick, Louis, Anthony, George, Eric, Ken, and myself. And basically just tell us what you like about each album, what you don't like, and then tell me your winner, and then we'll move on to the next person. So Chuck, you are the first entry.
I'm the first one today, man.
Yes.
Oh, first time ever.
Right.
Man. Well, once again, good evening, everyone. I was very stoked for this over here. I'm getting a little bit very excited about talking about these two fantastic albums. First one, Trilogy by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Can't go wrong with this album. Whether or not it's one of their best albums, I would say that it is, in my opinion. I love listening to the album. The title track is the definitive Emerson, Lake and Palmer song for me. It's a song that I usually get teared up, especially after the death of both Keith Emerson and Greg Lake. It's very hard to listen to that song. I like everything on here. I know that usually people get on the sheriff, but I still think that this album is just fantastic. But in my opinion, it pales in regards to Octopus. Octopus is number 2 only to The Power and the Glory when it comes to Gentle Giant. You talk about a band that was firing all cylinders. It's the last album with the elder brother, the elder Schulman, and it's the first album with John Weathers as the drummer, Pugwash. And there isn't a single bad song on here. And this album is very short too.
Yeah.
This album is not
34 minutes, right?
Yeah, 34 minutes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yet they
like a Van Halen album.
Yeah, exactly. It's a fantastic album. Not a single weak moment on here. My favorite song on this album is River. I love A Dog's Life. I just love this album from beginning, the advent of Panurge, Raconteur Troubadour, and then you have A Cry for Everyone. Knots. Knots is one of those crazy songs that just tends to go spiraling all over the place. But in this War and Soul, as much as I love Emerson, Lake and Palmer, The Endless and Enigma, both songs, and Fuge, and From the Beginning is another beautiful song, I still go with Octopus as my number 1 from Gentle Giant, 1972.
There you go. All right. 1-0. Favor of the Giants. John, welcome back.
It's me already?
Yes.
Well, yeah, I have to do a little digging here because, it's been a while since I've listened to either of these albums. So I put them on yesterday, and, it brings back memories. It wasn't my first 2 bands, like when I was, listening to music back in the 70s. I'm not sure why, but I discovered both bands kind of after. And yeah, so maybe the last 30 years or 25 years, I love I love Octopus. I mean, they're so complex, and I thought at first it was maybe, I was going to say it's a bit jarring because, you know, you're listening to a segment and then it will spiral off into something else, right? But then I listened to it again today, actually, and I didn't get that at all. It was, you know, the transitions are actually pretty smooth. And that's just a testament to how great musicians they are. And they add everything in there, right? There's horns, there's like a vibraphone solo. There's everything is in there, violin. And what makes it kind of cool for me is how they incorporate melodies into this stuff. Because, you know, at first listen, you might not get it. But then, you know, when you think there's no like discernible melody that kind of hooks you, it starts to do that for me. I think my favorite tunes on it, I love I love it when it rocks, like Cry for Everyone, I really dig. Maybe a little bit, it's not a simple song, but I like when they kind of rock out. Dog's Life is really cool. I'm a dog lover, so it's kind of, I think that's a really good song. I really like the violin in that one. The River is awesome. That might be my favorite on the album. Like the bluesy guitar solo, I really like. Think of Me with Kindness kind of almost reminded me of ELP a little bit, in that it's kind of grandiose. And the trumpet, it has this trumpet that kind of reminded me of when ELP gets a little bit bombastic. It's a great album, no doubt about it. And Knots, of course. I mean, listening to that yesterday for the first time in many years, probably, I wasn't sure. And I love the vocals, they're so complex, and that's kind of Gentle Giant's thing as well. I listened to it again today, and I'm hearing some melodies that, you know, I didn't hear the first time. So and it takes time, right? Gentle Giant. So it's a great album. Okay, so ELP Trilogy. Right off the bat, though, these songs kind of hook me quicker, I think. Not that means they're better. Objective. So, I mean, The Endless Enigma for me is just a great song. And Lake's vocals, Emerson's organ, that kind of gets to me. I love that song. I love From the Beginning. I love, again, Lake's vocals. What else? Sheriff and Hoedown. I like how they kind of do the little country and Western thing going on. I'm not the biggest fan, but, you know, that honky tonk piano in the Sheriff. Hoedown is really catchy. And then Trilogy, maybe my favorite song on it. The mood playing is outstanding in Trilogy. I love that. Yeah, the only song that probably my least favorite on this one is Abaddon's Bolero, just because it kind of maybe drags on a bit too much for me. But overall, I think I'm going to give this one to Trilogy by just a little bit. It's kind of like neck and neck, but we'll do Trilogy.
Okay, cool.
Both great albums.
Tied at one. You said something really interesting about Gentle Giant before, which I've heard from so many people. It's like, it takes time. I don't think anybody gets Gentle Giant right off the bat.
I would never recommend Gentle Giant to anyone who, you know, is new to prog.
My good friends,
like maybe
proggers make fun of me.
do Asia, but you know, they're so good. Yeah.
So different that it's hard to get into them at first.
Yeah, they're uncanny.
It does take time.
That's the thing. You're hearing some stuff that sounds like it could be a movie score, and then a theater, street theater type of music. Then they rock the hell out of it. It's just amazing. And you think about how many people in the band, they're so tight when they do the unison part. That's the most pleasing thing, is that, man, can they do this live? Because it's so good on record.
And they could.
And they can. Yeah. You know, that's the first thing you hear when you go, wow, this is so complicated, but so together, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, 1-1 tie. Stephen Reed, what do you got?
Well, the way that Gentle Giant was summed up to me today was when I was listening to it, and my other half came into the room, and we're talking away, telling me what there's a way to do or whatever it was. I was listening. And And she stopped the conversation and went, "What are you listening to?"
And that has happened to me so many times over the years with my wife, almost exactly to a T. Like, what the hell is this? It's like,
And my guess would
like,
be,
that Gentle Giant band. Oh,
my guess would be that might not have happened with ELP. It still might have done, but there you go. So yeah, to me, I mean, Trilogy, it's a stone cold classic. It's a pillar of prog. It's one of those albums that I would suggest most kind of pure prog fans will hold up and say, this is what the genre is all about.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, they're one of those bands and it's one of those albums. And I really think that ELP, from the debut through to Brain Salad Surgery, fall into that category each and every time. Trilogy doesn't necessarily become my favourite out of those, but it's adventurous and it's daring. There's aspects when you listen to this album where you think, how much of this was just made up on the hoof? Or was it all carefully crafted? Because it's at points it's loud and it's bold and it's quite angry. It's an intense experience and it's quite frantic in places, but I think that that was really quite intended. Do you know, Hoedown's a perfect example here, because Carol Palmer's inherent looseness, it kind of adds a danger. It's, you know, is it going to fall apart or is he going to hold it all together? But the way the three of them combine make it really something special, I think, in that sense. And you never quite know if Palmer is dragging the whole thing along. You know, he's frantically battering away as everyone runs to keep up with him. Or is he back there going, wait for me, guys? You never quite know. But I really enjoy the interaction between them that seems to happen in that sense. But there's just so much on this album that I've always loved and I really still love. And it hits hard, I think, when you go back to it now. And I think also that the, in inverted commas, token Greg Lake song from the beginning is, for me, one of the strongest ones that he put together. I still really love, you know, the guitar structure, just the sound of the song. His vocal's fantastic. Even at the end of an album with so much going on, that's the song that sticks in my head. That's the song that I walk away and sing. And that, to me, tells you why it's on there. It is to break the album up. It is to offer you something different. It was to keep them happy, let's be honest. However, it's also much more than that. It's a great song in its own right. So that, to me, is Trilogy. And it's difficult to argue about how important it is in this genre, because it really is. Octopus, on the other hand, is important in different ways. I've always seen Gentle Giant as the absolute masters of the arrangement. Do you know, nothing that they do happened by accident. You couldn't just make this up on the hoof. This is crafted and it's constructed, but it doesn't sound sterile at all. I think Knots is a great example of the cohesiveness of what was going on there. I mean, in the wrong hands, that song could sound like a group of musicians falling downstairs. Do you know, with every single instrument following them down them. But it doesn't. It's fantastic. And then the boys in the band is like organised madness. I love that coin spin on the table that introduces it. Totally needless, but you listen for it every time and it still makes me smile. And what I also like about that song is they really bring the rock in prog rock there. That's a heavy song without being heavy rock, but it really is quite intense in that sense. And then you've got to incorporate the fact that they're using there's xylophone, there's saxophone, there's viola, there's cello, there's violin, there's more synths and keyboards than you can shake a stick at, there's guitars, there's bass, there's drums, there's everything, all played by the guys in the band. That's really impressive. That's really key to how natural and unforced it all sounds. It's not an excuse for a guest star or whatever it may be. And the other thing with Gentle Giant for me at this stage is there's such a signature sound. Do you know, there's a 4, 5, arguably 6 album run in this catalogue that this album is part of. You only need to hear a couple of notes and you think, oh, Gentle Giant, I know exactly who this is. It couldn't be anybody else. Do you know? So picking highlights, virtually impossible. I think the whole album from start to finish, it just works for me. And I love this one too. So this, as always, is really difficult, really difficult. But the difference for me between the two is when I put on Trilogy, I'm whisked back in time. I'm taken to the period when this was recorded. And I actually found listening to these two albums back to back quite a lot in the last couple of days quite difficult to even fathom that they were recorded in the same year, because Trilogy sounds like 1972. Octopus sounds like it could have been recorded last week. But it just sounds current, it sounds vibrant, and it sounds amazingly now. But not because it's been tarted up or whatever it may be, just because it's reasonably timeless. So I love both of these albums and I respect both of these bands. But this wins by a country mile for me. It's not even close, not even close. So it's Octopus and it's Gentle Giant for me.
All right.
Nice.
All right, 2-1. Rick.
Okay, to piggyback on what a lot been said by my Prog brothers here, they're both fantastic record. This is a good war. I mean, talk about Clash of the Titans, right? I mean, these are definitely powerful albums, and I got a pretty good close relationship with these albums for a long period of time. But to be honest, when I look at my album collection, I would say you would think Emerson, Lake and Palmer got more CDs that I seem to collect than Gentle Giant. Mm-hmm. And as much as I love this album, because I do, because from the beginning, all the songs that people mentioned, Trilogy, that really stands out a lot to me. This really shows everybody in the full power of the craft. We already understand what they're about because of the 3 albums behind them, or 4 albums if you want to count the live album. And so what was the spectrum of them. And so I love the way they put the album together with the dynamic, soft Hamlin, and then the piano, and then bombastic full volume albums. One of those things that you got to keep turning up the stereo or adjusting it because it can wake everybody in the house. And it's awesome, right? And there's some songs that is just timeless, even from the beginning. It reminds me of all those classic rock songs that we love, like 10 Years After, I Just Want to Change the World, has that vibe, or Tuesday Afternoon from the Moody Blues. It's so accessible, and I guess because that heavy reverb, it reminds me of those type of songs. And so it is a lot to be said about that. But see, with Emerson, Lake and Palmer, this would rank about number 4 for me. Number 1 would be the first album, number 2, Brain Salad, Surgery, number 3, Tarkus, and then this comes. We're moving on to Gentle Giant, and this is like my favorite album from Gentle Giant. It really is. I mean, and again, I don't have as many as I do with these guys. I'm still interested in following their whole career. But anyway, this album's fantastic. It just blows your head off with all these arrangements. And being that they're double the manpower, they're so tight and so, it wasn't loose end jamming a little bit. There's all these things are written on paper almost. It's so tight. And I love that. The unison and yet throw harmonies in there. And of course, the rocker, Cry for Everyone. I love that. Mm-hmm. And my favorite, The River. The River because it changes so much like water does. If you were following water and it hit you a rough spot or going down a dam, I mean, they give you a real musical trip. And that's the thing. It is a trip. It's not for just anybody you give to be accessible. It takes acquired taste and a few listens, but I like it. Can I appreciate it? And for me, I don't just listen to it like for a song and the instruments, which I do because I play a lot of instruments, but I also hear it for the engineer mixing. That's pretty creative shit in 72. Like some of the stuff that they did to make all these instruments stand up and rise it to the surface and bring it down for the next. There's a lot of work here moving up the faders to get that whole band the way they sound so tight. The engineers just as much as the part of the star of the album to me, because they made sure everybody's heard. Sometimes when you have a big band, it just get muddy when you try to get everybody in equal volume, but they are playing around with it so you don't miss nothing. And so I like that. So this is the winner for me. I love the artwork. It's fantastic album cover.
Roger Dean, baby.
And so this is gonna win him for me because it is my favorite Gentle Giant. Though this is a good contender, there's no question about it.
And the U.S.
The original.
There you
Yeah,
go.
the original.
Yes, that's the American version, right?
Yep.
Only.
Yes, it is. Mhm.
Yep.
Pathetic.
Very. I agree.
Octopus in a jar.
I agree.
I mean, the Roger Dean is classic. I don't mind the other one for what it is, but it's not the Roger Dean. I love how Rick threw out acquiring the taste in that whole discussion part of it there, because it's very true, right? You got to acquire the taste for this band. It just doesn't, doesn't just happen like that.
That's right. That's right. And you know why? It's because of the pace. They don't feed you like babies meat and pablum, and you give them a big diet. They throw away at you, and there's a lot of people. It's hard to take it all in, but it's so uncanny and unpredictable. And I think the best part about it is that everything seems like it should be there. It's not like you overthought. Everything made sense to why they take the album the way they do. Where Emerson, Lake and Palmer, there's sometimes they're feeling to fill in the time. The clock is running. They could jam, and they could probably out of 4 versions, they picked this version to go on the album. Where this is all written, measured, making it on purpose to deliver the way it is. That's my impression.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Cool. All right, 3-1.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
George.
For me,
George.
Yeah. Full disclosure, I went into this thinking that I'm a bigger Gentle Giant fan than ELP. But as we've seen with this series, you listen and you may get your mind changed. And I kind of did. I got kind of brought back to center here. The ELP, the opening tracks, the 3 tracks, they kind of go together. That's a solid tune, but it doesn't grab me. From the beginning, though, it's a softie, but it's a good softie. I mean, you got Greg Lake playing the acoustic. Sounds good.
Great vocals.
The Sheriff and Living Sin, kind of like cheesy honky tonk stuff, those are not my favorite. Hoedown I love. Great instrumental. I mean, that's Aaron Copland, I think, wrote that. Really good tune.
Rodeo.
And Trilogy is another. The title track, it's a good epic. I mean, everything you can want. And it sets up almost like a trilogy with the parts. Abaddon's Bolero, again, this is a Ravel adaptation. I thought it could have been a little meatier. You're going to put 8 minutes into it. I expected a touch more, but it's not a bad song by any means, but I thought it could have been a little more exciting. The Gentle Giant, this was the first Gentle Giant album I ever heard. And just from the first track, Evan and Pernurge was just sucked in. I didn't quite get it, but I wanted to get it because it was interesting, The whole first side, actually, the old vinyl side, is excellent. Knots, very impressive vocal work. But Boys in the Band, again, it's just like the other album. It's a great instrumental. Probably might be my favorite track, either that or Pernurge. Second side's good, not as good for me, but you got another pretty ballad, Think of Me with Kindness. So you actually have a couple good softies on these albums. But like I think John said, when Gentle Giant rocks, that's when they're at their most effective, I think. And for me, the better upbeat songs on their record are more impressive to me than the ELP stuff. And they don't have the couple songs that I might want to skip like the ELP does. So I'm going to say Gentle Giant in this one.
Nice.
Even with a couple softies.
Yeah.
And you're wearing the shirt. All killer, no filler.
No filler.
Yeah, I like that vocal stuff too, Not, oh man.
Yeah. And I gotta say, I'm very happy to see that Chuck is not drinking ketchup tonight.
Yeah, I gotta put that away, man.
You gotta move on to hot sauce.
Exactly.
For those of you wondering what the hell I'm talking about, you got to watch every episode because we do continue on.
This is a series, man.
That's right.
We're not going to give you a recap. What the hell?
I think we're going to let those 2 UK connection guys be the only show that does that. No.
Nope.
Right, Steven?
No idea what you're talking about.
No,
Just can't let go. Just can't let go.
100%. That's right. And if anybody has no idea what Steven just did, you need to go watch the UK Connection on Saturdays. All right.
Timeless, man.
Anthony.
Oh. All right.
Wait. Hold on a second. Hold on a second.
Uh-oh.
Where's the yellow?
Yeah.
I wanted to be different tonight.
Okay.
Oh, man.
Your fans are going to be upset with you. But that's okay.
Well, I kind of started to get self-conscious now that I'm wearing the same sweatshirt every time I'm on the show, I guess.
Oh, he is not telling the truth. That is the fucking yellow, but it got ruined in the laundry. That's what happened.
No, it's nice and clean. I just,
okay.
All right. 1972, Gentle Giant Octopus versus ELP Trilogy. Gentle Giant Octopus. I used to have it. I can't find it. I was going to buy it from Ken, and I bought it for somebody else because I'm such a good guy. But complex arrangements, complex music, the typical harmonies from Carrie and Derek. They're fantastic. I think a couple of my favorites on that are Knots and The Advent. Gentle Giant has this way of their opening tracks just usually is all balls prog, as if you can see the follow-up with In the Glass House, The Runaways. Just I feel that way about that tune too. But against ELP, I mean, here we go.
There we go.
The Mo-Fi, the remaster, and of course, Ken, what's this pressing? What begins with a C?
Cotillion.
Yeah, is that the good one to have, or is that the crap?
No, the best
I think
one
it sounds good.
No, you want to get the original Palm Tree Island British pressing.
Okay, well, that's what I'll look for next time.
Yeah, it's insane.
Gentle Giant's a great band, don't get me wrong, but the Endless Enigma Part 1 and 2, Haunting, from the beginning. Greg Lake, I think, is an underrated guitar player. The vocals are just absolutely killer. In the great words of Pete Pardo, Living Sin is very kind of like menacing. Trilogy, as Chuck said, is just absolutely gorgeous. It's just very emotional. So I'm going with ELP Trilogy. They win this round.
Nice.
Number two. Ken, you feeling slighted that he placed an order with another retailer and not you?
No,
I bought it from Ken.
No, he bought Octopus from me, but he sent it off to somebody.
Ah, got you. Okay, I misunderstood. Sorry. I know Anthony's your number one customer, right?
He's up there.
You are our favorite online retailer, I will say that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Have been for a long time.
I do appreciate it. I may be a prick, but I do appreciate it.
Two things can be true.
Luis, remember, Luis.
Uh-oh.
All right.
What are we at, Pete, here? 4-2? Is it 4-2 now? Or
4-2, yes. So there's still
4-2.
time to change this. All right. So it's not over yet. Lewis.
All right. So I'm going to take a slightly different approach with this because I've had a different history with these two albums. Back around 2013, I joined an ELP tribute band called Fanfare. And we must have played the whole Trilogy album live many, many times during the 3 or 4 years that I was with that band. So I have a different take on the record because it's one thing when you just listen to it, another thing when you learn it, another thing when you play it live, back to back, all the songs night after night, right? So I really don't, and this is true in general of ELP, I don't like their jokey songs, like The Sheriff and, Benny the Bouncer and all these things they do. I don't dig that, all right? Another issue that I have is that a song like From the Beginning is nice to listen to, but when you find yourself playing it over and over, you are ready to just hit somebody with your bass guitar if they request it. It's just a fact, okay? I don't know how these guys do it. Much respect to them. But so those are two that are out. And then Abaddon's Bolero is a song which is not fun to play. I just leave it like that. Hoedown is awesome. And when you hear it live on the recordings, the only problem that it has is that it's always played at cocaine tempo. So it's like chipmunk frenzy, you know, it's not great. But when you actually, you know, play it at a regular speed, it's really a fun jam, and you can do things. It's nice. And the fugue, the thing in the middle of the Endless Enigma Part 1 and 2, is actually a great piece of music, right? Of course, Trilogy is my favorite to play. I still love listening to it, even though I played it a bunch. I even had the good fortune of playing it with Mike Keneally for the Emerson tribute that we did in Chicago. So I've had, you know, I've played that a lot. It's a great album. And every time that you study Keith Emerson's compositions, you're going to learn a lot. That's just all there is to it. The guy was a genius, and he knew music in a way that was very idiosyncratic and very special, right? However, the task was to say which is my favorite, right? And for me, when I listen to Gentle Giant, it's always, every time I hear the records, I always discover something new. Every time, right? And it's 34 minutes, but there isn't a second wasted. Everything, it's like a perfect machinery. It's like being inside a clock, right? There's something about it that is kind of disturbing and soothing at the same time. You know, I love that aspect of their music. And you know, it always, believe it or not, has like a little bit of a swing to it. It has like a little bit of an attitude. There's like a little, you know, come over here kind of a thing. You know, it's a really nice thing. You know, it's different from prog, right? Prog is mostly a sausage fest, and this is different. This has a little bit of a swagger, which I like a lot. Plus, I also was very lucky that I got to watch three friends perform in Montreal. And I was there when they did Think of Me with Kindness.
Oh, nice.
And when Kerry Minier was brought to tears, because, you know, the Montreal audiences, when they like something, they don't leave. And you explain to them that we've played everything we know, and they'll say, play it again. and later in the hotel when we were having a party and Kerry was there, for me it was like a really nerve-wracking moment, because I'm going to meet somebody who I greatly admire as a songwriter and as a musician. And it was really, you know, it was surprising to me to learn that he didn't have a very high opinion of Gentle Giant. Like, he didn't view it as a great success. And I couldn't possibly comprehend how anybody could say that about, especially him, right? So that just tells you how we all see the same things differently, right? And standing on that stage and watching these people give him this standing ovation and refusing to leave really changed the way that he remembered that music. And it was a really powerful moment. So I love that record. I love that memory of that song, which is from that record. I love Boys in the Band. The opening track is just so
let's move that and put the house back. I mean,
and
Bonnie's on the approach.
And the river is
he tried to get in, and it was too.
Are you ordering a pizza, Anthony?
No, I'm trying to. My cat was trying to get in the house, but it was kind of moved wrong. Sorry.
Don't worry about it. And I just thought, I just think that record is not my favorite Gentle Giant record even. My favorite Gentle Giant record is In a Glass House.
Yeah, that's mine too.
But I have to give it to Octopus. Just because, even though the trilogy is a great album and the title track is amazing, right? And I actually don't mind Living Sin. Living Sin is a fun song to play.
I love it.
I like that song.
It's actually better to play than to hear for me. It's a nice riff to play. It's got some, and you can rock it out. You can really give it some nads. It's a good tune, right? But I have to give it to Gentle Giant. It's just I think Steven said something which is very true. There is something about those songs that they don't sound of their day. And that is something really difficult to achieve, right? I mean, and it's also true that most people are not going to latch onto it at first. Mara, our merch lady, was Sona Sombra. One day we worked together at Columbia, and I was doing some grading. And normally I'm a miserable son of a bitch at all times, and especially when I'm grading. But I was listening to music, and I didn't seem to be so miserable. So she wanted to know what the hell I was listening to. And it was Gentle Giant. I put the headphones on her head, and she looked at me, and she said, "You have serious problems."
Wow.
So, I understand that it's not for everybody, and it's certainly not going to be good on first impression, right?
I think it'd be said about both bands. They say there's a fine line between genius and madness, and they walked that tightrope pretty damn good, both bands.
Yeah, I mean, ELP were on fire. I mean, when they were great, they were amazing.
Oh,
right?
they were amazing.
Yeah.
Come on, right?
Exactly.
They headline.
We're comparing two titans of albums, right?
Big time.
So this is the thing. It's a little silly for me to weigh in that regard, right? But if you're asking for my preference, I have to give it to Octopus, because that album still gives a rewarding listen. And I just recently, in preparing for this episode, because I don't have the illness like you guys, I don't buy every remix, every whatever. I don't do that. But I listened to the Steven Wilson remix, and that was quite good. Right?
It is.
So I which really pissed me off, because now I'm thinking about buying it, and I don't want to fucking buy it again, right? But I may have to, right?
That's because it's a curse. Really... It's a curse, Lewis. It's not an illness.
I know, but the thing about it is that
forever.
It really made enough of a difference. I mean, in nowadays, of course, you can make the mix, you can automate it, right? So it's not a performance like Rick was saying before. In those days, the mix was pretty much a performance as well.
Yes, it is. Yep. Yes, it was.
But in nowadays, you just move the faders, and then the computer remembers and moves them for you, right?
Yep.
So you don't have to repeat sections. But it's so good that Steven Wilson and it has revealed, as with the Jethro Tull and some other things that I've heard him do, some new kick-ass nuggets. So
that's what it's all about. I do want to make a comment on something you said before, because I think it is very, very true. I think one of the things that always set Gentle Giant apart from a lot of their contemporaries, and why you can listen to Gentle Giant's music today and not say instantly, "Oh yeah, that's prog from the 70s," because they never really followed that prototypical 70s symphonic prog sound, right? I mean, there's no, I mean, the big mellotrons and the 12-string guitars and the soaring Moog synthesizer solos and all the things that we would expect from Yes and Genesis and King Crimson and the Moody Blues and, all the other bands. Then you got this band, Gentle Giant, who doesn't do any of that, right? It still sounds glorious. It's still groundbreaking, but it doesn't sound like it came necessarily from 1972 or 75.
Only one album that was over 40 minutes. That was their debut.
And they never released the quote unquote epic.
No.
Did they have a song over?
Well, the album was epic. They don't need to have an epic. The album,
Memories,
Agreed.
Memories of Old Days might be their longest, and that's on Missing Piece, which most people would think is more of a, when they were kind of going.
Yeah, all Gentle Giant fans hate that album.
I like that album.
The other thing,
you do not.
That was the tour I saw them on. It was a Missing Piece tour.
Yeah, I think for me, especially as a bass player, Ray Shulman is a big hero of mine.
She's fantastic.
Yeah,
he is an amazing musician. I think one of the best things anybody ever told me is that they thought I played a little bit like him. Keneally told me that, and that was really, for me, I was like, all right, that's pretty cool, because that's like a deep cut. Like somebody's really listening to the shit that I'm doing.
Yeah, great musician for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I love the Giant.
I think the thing you're saying about them being sounding contemporary, is mostly because nobody else sounds like them, really. I mean, so they do stand out in that way. I could only think of really two bands that sound like Gentle Giant. Griffin, or as Stephen probably calls him, Gryphon, sounds a little bit, maybe a little bit like Gentle Giant. And then there was this German band, Epidermis, who did an album called Genius Original Force, which basically was just like a blatant Gentle Giant ripoff. But other than that, you didn't, there were a ton of ELP clones, right? And Yes clones and, symphonic prog. But Gentle Giant their sound was so individual that it does, I guess you could characterize it as contemporary, because it doesn't stand out as a 70s album.
Right. That's exactly what I meant. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, do you think people copied ELP because ELP was so popular and big?
Well, yeah. Why would you want to copy a band that was playing to 1,500 people when you can copy a band that's playing to 15,000?
15,000.
I mean,
it took decades for younger bands in the 90s to say, hey, what Gentle Giant was doing was something pretty cool back there. Now we're going to do this sort of thing. Because you've had a lot of bands trying to do something similar since, but not contemporaries back in the day.
But you see, can you guys imagine, like, if they will never do it, but if they got back together, right? I could easily imagine a concert with a band like Polyphia, Animals as Leaders, and Gentle Giant.
Yeah,
not being ridiculous, right? I would have a harder time thinking of ELP with some of the more current bands who are playing the more complicated serve.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the thing. It's just it's just such a great.
But Luis, don't you think a lot of that has to do with the fact that ELP was a trio, and there wasn't a lot of guitar on those albums, and the focus was really on Keith Emerson? I mean, there really was. I mean,
yeah. To me, ELP was they kind of attacked it, and it was in many ways kind of like the Who. It was three guys playing instruments with a lot of power, right?
Yeah,
that was the thing. So it was by nature sparse. That's absolutely true, and it had a lot of aggression. And it had Keith Emerson stabbing the fucking organ and doing the whole thing.
They were a power trio of a different kind.
Of course.
Yeah.
But it's still a very 70s era kind of trio. Like nowadays, they even have duos that don't go that route. They go more into moods.
Who plays a Hammond organ now?
Yeah.
Oh, not many people, because it's a pain in the ass to carry it, to play.
Yeah, but even a fake one, even a fake Hammond organ.
Yeah. Well.
So I mean, nobody goes around with mellotrons anymore. Nobody goes around with any of that analog stuff. I mean, I watched that. Oh, geez, what's the name of that band? They played at Prague Power. They were using a goddamn laptop. It was, I can't remember. Young band. They were on. They were on Magna. They were on Magna Carta. They literally were on stage with a laptop. I'm like, what?
They were using native instruments.
Well, I mean,
But you can't underestimate that. That was a guitar era too. Those guys pulled it off, ELP, with a keyboard-dominated band in the lights of Jimmy Page era, Blackmore. I mean, guitar was still God, like it always has been all through the decade. To survive that trend and have bands want to imitate them, it's a pretty big deal for me, because I'm like, they're so unique. Not too many bands could follow that.
But you know what, though, Rick? I think Keith Emerson, even though he was the keyboard player, not guitar player, I think fans were gravitated towards that over-the-top soloist guy. So in other words, he to the keyboards was kind of like the Hendrix, the Blackmore, the Page, etc. on the keyboards, which I think people were attracted to.
Yeah, he's definitely a showman.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things I didn't
don't forget, Greg Lake, the man with the golden voice. I mean, come on.
One of the things I didn't like about Works, when we were talking about Works a few months ago, whatever. One of the things he didn't play the Hammond organ on the album. Right. Mm-hmm. He was just playing that Yamaha GX1. And I didn't particularly like the sound of that thing. When it was Emerson, Lake and Powell, and he brought back the Hammond, I was like, that gave me wood. So.
Yeah, no, of course.
When I want to hear ELP, I want to hear Keith playing the Hammond organ.
Of course,
that's the sound.
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah. All right, we've got 5-2.
We need a Tom Brady comeback here.
Yeah. What do you got, Eric?
Well, I'll start with Trilogy. A lot of people have talked and made a lot of points, so hopefully I can bring a few different things in. Obviously, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, one of the original supergroups, since these guys had all come from other bands, came together. So I've got to assume, even though I was too young to know, that there was some excitement from people knowing these guys from their previous incarnations and the bands that they played with. And as far as Trilogy, ELP was probably, I obviously heard them much before I heard of Gentle Giant. So I had brain salad surgery and the first one and this prior to even knowing who Gentle Giant was. So I had more history with ELP. And with this album in particular, I like the first side, except for the Sheriff. The second side doesn't do a lot for me. I don't like Living Sin. I don't like the last one, Abaddon's. That one seems to go on too long. And Trilogy, as much as I like the piano, and I think that's something that we've talked about, the Hammond organ a lot. I think Emerson, the piano playing is fantastic too.
Oh, yeah.
But everyone thinks of him on the Hammond, like Endless Enigma. I think Trilogy has a lot of beautiful piano fugue, obviously. But that second side just doesn't do anything for me. I've never really cared for it. As much as the first side I think is fantastic. Hoedown from the beginning. I know we've heard it a million times, but it's a beautiful song. Mm-hmm. But it's still a great album, and they're a great band. Both bands are great musicians. And I think some of the things, Anthony just mentioned Greg Lake. Obviously, he's a great singer. I don't think Gentle Giant had that. Derek Shulman was more of, we'll use acquiring the taste again. And I know Phil sings a lot on Octopus. So I'll bring kind of Octopus into the mix. I think with Octopus, the thing for me that really stands out is John Weathers. I think he makes a huge difference in Gentle Giant. Mm-hmm. They're so much tighter. There was a lot more, and I know that was kind of a style with a lot of bands. I just felt like John Weathers is just so tight, and he does give them a little more power. And when they rock, I think they rock harder with John Weathers than they did with their previous drummers. So, with that, Carl Palmer, I know, same thing. I mean, he seems erratic to me, even on the studio records, and choppy sometimes on some of those songs where I just think Weathers is rock solid. And the way I always think of Gentle Giant, and I know Lewis mentioned Ray Shulman. When you listen to these songs, I mean, I absolutely love Knots and Boys in the Band are probably my two favorites.
They're good ones.
You hear Gary Green doing something. You hear Ray Shulman doing something. You hear Phil, whether it's horns, there's violins, but you've got all these guys, they're all doing a little something different, and yet it's cohesive and it comes together. And Lewis, I know you pointed it out, so I don't want to beat a dead horse. Ray Shulman's bass lines, just listen to him. When you go out and listen to this record or any Gentle Giant record, he really stands out. Gary Green, same thing. He's not your in-your-face guitar player. Every once in a while he'll have a lead or two here or there, but same thing. He's got all these little lines. Everything kind of weaves together. Kerry Minier is off the charts. And again, not an in-your-face player, but when you really listen to what he plays, and I'm not a keyboard player, and it's not to take anything away from Keith Emerson, obviously, he's fantastic, but I just think there's a subtlety to Gentle Giant. And when you listen, you can listen to those records over and over and over, and I'm always hearing something. Oh, I didn't catch that, but I've listened to this record 150 times. And, again, everyone said so much, but I think when it comes down to it, I'm going to pull out Octopus before I pull out Trilogy. So I'm going to pull a Jamie Laszlo here. Octopus gets my vote.
He's gonna love that.
Jamie, now in the next episode he appears on, he's going to be like, all right, I got to come up with something extra special.
I'm always jealous of his props, so I had to try something.
He's the man.
Props are awesome. Eric, you're in a pretty good mood today, even though pitchers and catchers didn't report.
I know. I'm not happy about it, but we'll see.
All right, 6-2 in favor of Gentle Giant. Ken.
Pete, does my vote count for like 3?
Wow.
So, I'll talk about Octopus first. So I'll probably repeat a lot of what was said, but for me, if it wasn't their best album, it was pretty close. They were very consistent, and they had a great run. In a Glass House was great. I love Freehand. After that, like Interview, it started to get a little repetitive, but yeah, I mean, and as we were saying, nobody really sounded like them. So there was just like this complexity that they threw at you that was really unlike anybody else. That's what made them so different, and probably why they didn't sell a lot of albums. So the album had what I think it actually kind of defined the classic Gentle Giant sound. Vocals were really a key part. There was this medieval feel to the album, incorporating madrigal, a cappella vocals. I mean, who was doing that? Nobody was doing that, really, other than like Griffin, and Gentle Giant was doing it before them. You listen to the opening of Knots and the vocal counterpoint, get your head spinning. I mean, it's ridiculous. So there's constantly shifting time signatures, great musicianship. I think of them as like a band of team players. It's very organic. Somebody like Eric was saying, like Gary Green, some beautiful acoustic work, but it's not like he's a guy standing out and playing like these unbelievable solos, but he's fantastic. I mean, you got Kerry Minier. I mean, he's got the whole arsenal. He's got the Moogs, but sometimes in Mellotron, everything, but sometimes he's just at his best when he's just playing piano, and Shulman's also playing violin. It's great. I mean, listen to, to Rockin' Tour Troubadour. I mean, it's got this seismic bass. I mean, that track alone, man, that'll shake your plums. It's just, and especially you get the original British Vertigo pressing, and that thing just sounds unbelievable. To me, Knots is kind of like the fulcrum for the album. Besides the vocals, you get this kind of whacked out percussion. You got it's Killer Moog on it, and that's pretty much like it's like the essence of Gentle Giant. Boys in the Band is an instrumental. That's a little more, to me, because there's no vocals. It's a little more traditional prog, but all in all, it's a great album. It's got the total package, like we said. It got the Roger Dean cover, great mix. I love it. I mean, and as Luis was saying, every time you listen to it, something else jumps out at you. It's one of the, because there's just so much going on. It's hard to kind of lock onto one thing. Trilogy, totally different. It's a different kind of an album from a different kind of a band. I think that Trilogy is maybe their most overlooked album from the 70s, and that's probably a mistake. I mean, I think part of the problem is the band had a lot of difficulty playing it live. So they didn't play a lot of the album, like an Endless Enigma and Trilogy, that only appeared in their set list just a handful of times. Remember 77, I think they did From the Beginning, but they never really tackled Trilogy. They tried to play Abaddon's Bolero. Then they had Lake playing a Mellotron, and they were using backing tapes. And then at one of the shows, tape broke, and they dropped it from their set immediately. Right? I mean, but for me as a whole, it's just an incredible album. In terms of songwriting, it's got more depth and consistency than Tarkus. The musicianship is what you would expect. I mean, the best, for me, the best. Keith Emerson was the best. And of course, everybody knows at this point that ELP is my favorite band. So, I'm going to say it. But Emerson, he shows off a lot of diversity. Lake's voice was at his absolute peak. Palmer, to me, he's like machine-like. Eddie Offert's production is phenomenal. If you're an audiophile, this is one of my reference recordings for rock music. If you can, pick up an original British island pressing, because it sounds unbelievable, especially from the beginning. That's one of those albums where you want to just turn off the lights and just put the album on, man, just soak it all in. It's a showcase for Emerson. You know, he's knee deep in Hammond organ and Moogs, and even on From the Beginning, which is essentially an acoustic track, I mean, he wraps it up with this treacherous Moog solo. I mean, it's amazing, right? Right, Luis? I see you shaking your head. You're in agreement, yeah? So a lot of people don't like the Sheriff. They think it's a throwaway track, but I hear some great Hammond organ on it. I think it's a cool tune. It's like the country western song. And maybe it's because of the ragtime piano at the end of it. People think of it as like, Are You Ready, Eddie, or Benny the Bouncer? But I think it's a better song than that.
I think so too.
Hoedown, I think, is fantastic. It's an adaptation of Aaron Copland's Rodeo. And Emerson's kind of, to me, sounds like he's channeling a bit of Jimmy Smith. He's got this percolating Moog. He's killing it on the Hammond. And it was a staple of their live show. And if I remember correctly, they used to open up with Hoedown a lot. Trilogy is one of their greatest songs. I mean, it's got everything. You got great piano, you got the wild Moog solos, and the Hammond kicks in. And then Emerson, you know, gets to do his thing, and then Lake's vocals kind of pop in and out, and Palmer's playing like an octopus. I mean,
love it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of overdubbing going on. That's probably one of the reasons why they didn't play it, you know, more than a handful of times. They probably had trouble doing it. I like Living Sin. I think it's a great showcase for if you're a fan of Hammond organ, rock organ. I think it's great, and I like Lake's vocals on it. They finally played it in the live set, and it was fun. Abaddon's Bolero is probably the weak point of the album. I mean, it goes on a bit too much. I think it should not have closed the album out. I mean, frankly, I think it would have worked better if they would have. I was thinking in terms of sides, so side one, side two. I think it would have worked better as the first track on side two. It was not an adaptation of Bolero. It was clearly influenced by Ravel's Bolero. It starts out quiet, it gets heavier and heavier as more keyboards come in, it gets more layers and layers, and it builds an intensity. It would have been great leading into Living Sin and ending the album with Trilogy. So two great albums. 1972 was an amazing year, and I waffle back and forth between the two, trying to figure out which one I like better. You know, Reason says Octopus, but Trilogy is like the sentimental favorite, and ELP is my favorite band. The heart wants what the heart wants. So I got to go with ELP and Trilogy, and probably 5 minutes from now, I'll hate myself. But,
no, to address your point about the in the band that I was in, we had 5 musicians. And that's what we were able to play everything. Right. So that makes a big difference, right? I mean, I only had to play bass and some other instruments, and that was it, right? I didn't have to also sing, because nobody in this planet wants to hear me fucking sing. But the point is,
I don't even want to hear you talk, but
yeah, I mean, talking is already great enough. Trust me. So
with you, email is best, but
I have a voice for silent movies and a face for radio. But it's true that it is hard to play all the things that are on the record just by 3 guys. It can't really be done.
I think as well, I mean, we've all said Gentle Giant were amazing live, and they could bring this live. ELP were an event.
Yeah.
You know, that was maybe the difference. That's maybe why they took it all the distance that they could with just that trio, quite a static trio on stage, but it was an event. They really thought about the whole thing. It was a show. It was, you know, something that you would go away and remember. And that's reasonably unusual in the prog world. Other bands did different things, dressing up in costumes and various things, but ELP brought the show in a way that an awful lot of bands just never even considered doing. And that's maybe why
stadiums.
Steve, the first time I saw them was with a 70-piece orchestra. I mean, you know, it was crazy. I mean, you know, before that, they were playing quadraphonic when they did the Brain Salad Surgery tour. They were playing in quad.
Yeah, always something innovative, wasn't there?
Yeah.
All right, so it's 6-3. So obviously my vote doesn't count. Like, we could just end right now, right? But no. we're not. All right, let's talk about Trilogy first. I will agree wholeheartedly what Ken was saying about how great this album sounds.
Fantastic.
Really great sounding album. And again, even just the CD. I mean, I don't own the LP of this, but the CD itself. I mean, this is just a spectacular production by the band or by Greg Lake on this album. And from the Endless Enigma, both parts from the beginning is just amazing. Hoedown, Trilogy, some great stuff on here. Yeah, the Sheriff, I'm always hit or miss on. Abaddon's Bolero. I agree with what pretty much everybody said about this album. There's some spectacular moments on here. There's a couple of songs that I like, I don't love, but it's definitely one of their top albums. I think I agree. It's maybe an underrated album from them among the early stuff. It's a classic by them. Yeah, perfect album, start to finish. 34 minutes of brilliance. If it's not my favorite Gentle Giant album today, it might be tomorrow. It's been in my top 3 favorites from them for as long as I've been listening to them. It's either Octopus or In a Glass House or Three Friends or Freehand. I mean, those 4 kind of constantly rotate. It's not an easy listen. Sometimes, I remember in the very early 90s, I think it was like 91, I had never listened to this band before. And I remember reading some book on prog because I was totally getting into some of the new stuff coming out and trying to figure out what older bands I had not listened to yet. And I remember reading some reviews of Gentle Giant. They're like, oh, they're one of the most unique and eclectic and the hardest rocking of all the 70s prog bands. And me being a big hard rock and metal fan my entire life, I was like, I got to go check them out. So I went to Tower Records in Nanuet, New York, and I found this and Three Friends and Acquiring the Taste in the first album. And I bought all 4 of them at the same time. And I remember going home and listening to them one after another, and each one's like a half hour long. So basically in an hour and a half or so, I was done listening to all 4 of them. And I was thinking, what the hell was that I just listened to? And I was like, I agreed it was different. I agreed it was pretty intense and rocking, but I didn't have a clue what I was getting myself into. And it took me a couple of months before I finally started to, and I forced myself. I kept going back to it. And I was like, wow, this is some pretty amazing stuff here. And after a while, it all started to make sense because at first it just seemed like all this stuff thrown together, and this style of music that I had never heard before. I mean, I'm like, this doesn't sound like Genesis. This doesn't sound like Yes or ELP or Tull or any of those bands. I don't know what this is, but I think it's pretty brilliant. I love how there are so many different styles coming together, but yet it doesn't really wholeheartedly 100% sound like any of them. And I think it was Lewis. Yeah, Lewis was telling the story about going to see Three Friends in Montreal and Karen Minier kind of downplaying, the history of Gentle Giant. And I've interviewed Derek Shulman on a number of occasions, and I always got that impression from him that he was more surprised by the outpouring of love that has been given to this band all these years later. But looking back on it, he's always like, yeah, we never really thought we were a big deal. And I remember sitting backstage at a Three Friends concert in New York City at BB King's, hanging out with Gary Green. And he was like, yeah, we're doing this tour. It's a good way to go out and play the old songs again. But I don't have any expectations. And then, they go on stage and it's a packed house in New York City. And the people just, the love pouring out from the fans to these guys. And I mean, you could see by the look on their faces, they're like, wow, it's like people kind of love us, right? Like, what's this all about? When did this happen? And I think that is all the makings of a pretty special band. And I found over the years that as much as I love, ELP and a lot of their albums, there's very few bands in the prog world that I like more than Gentle Giant. And in fact, there's probably only one. That's probably Genesis, and it's really only the early Genesis. But I think this band is charming. They're intense. They're breathtaking. They're just everything I love about progressive rock, but then they're kind of like something more than that. So for me, the Aventurers, Raconteur, Troubadour, It's a Cry for Everyone, River. I mean, we've talked about all the songs. This for me is absolute perfection, as weird as it is. and I love the artwork and the cover. And I've told the story a few times, but right before the pandemic hit, I went to see that tour, Yes, in Asia, and Carl Palmer and John Lodge from the Moody Blues. And I remember walking into Bethel Woods, an outdoor venue up here where the original Woodstock was. And Roger Dean had a table and he was signing things and selling stuff. And I hadn't seen Roger in a bunch of years because I used to see him at Nearfest every year. And I walked up to him and I said hello and he remembered me and everything. And so I wanted to just talk to him to ask him, what was he selling? What's been going on in his world? And all he could do is look at my octopus shirt that I was wearing and think, and he said to me, he goes, "That is so cool you're wearing that shirt. That is one of my favorite artworks that I have done for any album cover in my life." And that's all he wanted to talk about was the Octopus album cover. Meanwhile, I'm like, I want to talk about Yes, what's he working on for Yes, all this kind of stuff. So long story short, Gentle Giant is it for me, Octopus. And there you have it.
Pete, what Roger was really thinking was that an officially licensed shirt?
Oh.
Yes, it was actually. I bought it from Alucard website. Yes, I bought it from the band.
Question: has Derek ever said why he wouldn't do a reunion?
Yes, he has. Yes, I ask him every time I talk to him because I keep figuring, if I don't talk to him for 5 or 10 years, that maybe they'll change their mind. I remember the first time I sat down, I went to his offices in New York City when it was DRT, I believe was the name of it. Yeah, so when they were doing
DRG, I think. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they were doing the original remasters and whatnot. So I went to New York City to his office and I sat down when it was the first time I met him, and we talked for like an hour. And then at the end, I said, "So, you talk to anybody who knows anything about 70s prog and you talk about like reunions of great bands. And the first one that comes to the conversation each and every time is Gentle Giant, how the world would love to see Gentle Giant reunite. So what's the deal?" And he basically, he had that kind of like, yeah, okay, this question again. And he was like, well, he goes, we've been getting asked for years. He goes, but the truth of the matter is we called it quits in 1980 for a reason. And we all moved on to other things. And it's been so many years that we just never really gave it any thought. And would it be fun to get back with everybody to do a show? Probably. He goes, but the problem is that would not be enough for the fans. And we would do the one show. They would want more. They would want another. They would want another. And to us, we're so far removed from it. And so when I talk to him again, like many years later, and I've talked to him a couple of times since then, I always keep bringing it up. It's kind of like a joke between us. And he goes, "Yeah, no, we're not doing that." It's like, it's flattering that everybody thinks so highly of our career. But to us, and again, going back to what Lewis was saying about Kerry, he's like, yeah, this was this little band we were in back in the 70s and it was fun at the time, but times changed. We didn't want to continue on. And we all have left it behind. He goes, if it wasn't for the fans, none of us would really, from the band, would really give this much of a thought anymore. But all these reissues and all these box sets and all this stuff. I mean, I think the band is very flattered of the outpouring of love that they've gotten over the years, because I don't think that they're in their minds that Gentle Giant ever lived up to any of that. Right.
Well, they never had the commercial success.
No,
the other band.
That's a cult following.
But I have a different story. Because I'm fairly good friends with Gary Green. He lives here in Illinois, and I often, especially before the pandemic, with him and Judy, they were very good friends with Norm. We go drinking and for shows and all that. And
peace, Norm.
They, I always asked them, once we were, 6 or 7 pints deep, like, what's up with this, right? And his answer was always, "Why don't you ask Derek?" So when I hear you say "we," I think it's the royal we.
Yeah. I think it's the Shulmans. I mean, it's probably the Shulmans, right? Yeah.
Right. So because the other guys have a different view, right? And it is difficult. Band politics is the worst. I understand completely, but it is hard. It is hard because it's a lot of work, right?
But did any of those guys do anything after Gentle Giant?
Yeah, Gary Green played on
Green,
Eddie
yes.
Jobson's solo album in 1983. Come on, Ken.
Oh yeah, forgot that. Eddie Joe.
Eddie Jobson. There you go.
You asked.
You know, and that was a career killer right there.
Oh, stop.
Why did Linear back
He
off?
played on that
from
album and it shit the bed, and that was it.
I think that was health reasons, Eric.
It was okay because
Yeah,
he
couldn't
did.
do the tour.
Heart.
He did start with them, right? And then it was only a little while, and then he kind of backed out. Okay.
He had a heart issue.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, Derek went off to become a very, very successful A&R guy, right? And
he ran Echo Records.
Yeah, and Ray has done producing and writing, and Ray's done it very well for himself as well. So, to them, it's like they had, great careers afterwards. John Weathers I think John Weathers went back to Man for a while because that's where he came from. So he was busy up until, he really could no longer play anymore. And, Gary's played in blues bands and done stuff here and there. And,
friends.
Yeah. By the way, I lost touch with Gary. If you do talk to him or see him, please tell him I said hello, because we kept in touch for quite a while, but then he just kind of he got sick for a while there, and then I lost touch with him.
Yeah, he was very sick for a bit, but he's better now. So I'll tell him.
I would love to reconnect with him. He's a great guy.
Absolutely.
Great guy. Well, there you have it, everybody. 7-3 is the final score in favor of Gentle Giant's Octopus. But as always, a fantastic discussion, regardless of who wins or loses, because there are no losers here. I think we can all agree that both of these are pretty damn impressive, spectacular albums. That's the important thing, is just to kind of talk about two albums. And we will do this again. So I want to thank everybody here on the panel for taking part in this discussion, as always. And visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. Check us out on Facebook. Check us out on Twitter. But of course, we're here all together all the damn time on YouTube. All the damn time. So let's see. Let's give a final roll call here. We got thank you to Chuck Alvarez and John Newdorf, Stephen Reed.
Thank you very much.
Rick Labonte, Louis Nasser, Anthony Farrar, George Lemie, Eric Porter, and Ken Golden. I am Pete Pardo. Thanks for watching, everybody. Tune in next Tuesday for another episode of In the Prog Seat. Till then, be safe, and we'll see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.
See you, everyone.
Have a good night.
Nice meeting you.